So my name is Laura, and I'm the director and producer, one of the directors and producers of The Yes Men Are Revolting, which is our new feature film by the Yes Men. It's our third documentary. The first one focused on the World Trade Organization. The second one was really about the perils of the free market. And the third one is focusing on climate change and climate activism, specifically climate activism. And we've been shooting since 2009. And we've been documenting the exploits of the Yes Men as they engage in climate activism around the world. We shot in 9 countries. We're following them, working with climate activists in Uganda, working with NGOs like Greenpeace and the Rainforest Action Network, working with people in the Netherlands as they go about taking on various organizations and climate evildoers. So can I just ask, how many of you are familiar with the Yes Men? So many of you, okay. So these are 2 guys who've been working together for about 15 years. They engage in something called identity correction, where they pretend to be people that they're not in order to make a satirical comment on the status quo. And they are basically busting into different conferences, to different governmental events, to do a kind of like media jamming, culture jamming, to interrupt the message and use the tools of the media to put out a different message about what the powers that be are up to. So for instance, in this film, we did an action against the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce is is the biggest lobbyist organization in the United States. They've spent an incredible amount of money fighting climate change legislation in the U.S. So the Yes Men pretended to be the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, rented a room at the National Press Club in D.C., busted in and gave a talk saying that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has changed its mind and is in fact supporting a carbon tax. I mean, they were fighting against cap and trade. So it's completely changing the message, giving a message to the media that makes everybody then pay attention to what the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is actually doing. We also did actions around the COP15 climate talks in 2009, where we pretended to be Canada and made an announcement supporting climate reparations for Africa. We did an action against Shell's cooperation with Gazprom in the Netherlands. And we have an action coming up. It's going to be the final of the film. I can't say anything about it because we haven't done it yet. I'll just say that it involves the U.S. government. And we did another action in the film called Shell Fail, and I'm going to let my colleague Mary talk about that in just a sec, because she can show you a storify from it and potentially a video from that. But it was really great to hear you speak, Becca, and I love seeing this graphic that you showed with the grief and then moving on through all the different phases, because we really show that in this film. These are 2 guys who have been doing this kind of activism for a very long time. And there's one thing to be an activist in your 20s, and it's another thing when you're in your mid to late 40s, maybe even older. And how do you keep going? How do you keep doing activist work year after year, decade after decade? And we're really trying to show the struggle of that. Because in this film, they really lose hope at a certain point, and they don't know how to keep going. And especially against the granddaddy of all problems. Climate change is a political issue that affects literally every single human being on the planet. And how does one confront that? And there is something to be dealt with in terms of climate grief and being in denial of it. And one of the reasons for that is that how do you get up in the morning if you believe that that is true? And so we watch them kind of go through this cycle themselves. They lose hope, they gain it back. And through that, hopefully we can all connect with people to encourage people to be able to believe that anything that we do to be active means something. That anything that we can do as human beings, no matter what you can do, no matter what your skill is, no matter what amount of time you can contribute, it's meaningful, and what just matters is that you are one voice in a culture of resistance that's able to speak back. So that's really the message of the film. There's a component of all social documentaries right now, which is taking the message of your film and doing outreach with it, doing impact with your film. It didn't used to be our jobs as filmmakers. It was enough to just make the film. But now we also have to use the film to go change the world. So at the end of our last film, we had all this energy and support to the people who watched the film, and they were totally jazzed up and they wanted to go do something. And we didn't really have a mechanism at the end. I mean, we could send them to our website, we could be like, join our mailing list, all the stuff that people do. But we didn't really have a way to plug people in to take the energy that they felt from watching the Yes Men do their very low budget, silly hijinks, using humor to kind of like attack big problems. If people wanted to do something and yet they didn't know how to do something. So the idea this time around was to create an action platform to be able to show people a way to get involved. And this is the Action Switchboard. So the Action Switchboard is, and Mary will talk about this more too, but it's a digital platform that we're going to be launching with the release of the film that allows people to come up with actions, or we call them schemes. And you can participate in this platform, you can help fund this platform, you can volunteer for it, you can communicate with it in somehow. There's like all these different ways that you can get involved with it. And some of these are not environmentally related, but most of them are, because that's really been a prime focus of the Yes Men for a while. So I'll let Mary talk more about that. But this is the way that we decided that we wanted to take the energy from the film and really be able to enlist and harness energy that happens with the audience afterwards. This will be global. We have a mailing list of around 100,000 people, and we'll be taking all of those people and trying to get them involved some way. We're going to be doing a series of screenings after we finish the film to try and get more people around the world to be able to get involved with the Action Switchboard. Because the weird thing about a film is that you make this film, you put it into the world, and if you do okay with it, and we've done okay with ours, you might get a couple million people to see the film. But how do you get a couple million people to do something after they see the film? And that's really the trick. And so this is the platform that we put together to help mobilize the action. So I'd like to have Mary come up. Mary's with the Yes Lab, which is the activist training organization that the Yes Men have put together to use techniques and strategies to basically teach activists or anybody else who's interested in doing something the kinds of techniques and strategies that the Yes Men use.
The Yes Lab is what the Yes Men came up with after the last movie, The Yes Men Fix the World, as some sort of mechanism to get people involved. It came out of that interest that was expressed by people who had viewed the film, and now I help run it over at NYU. And we actually do projects and do programs, so if you're interested in getting involved, come see me afterwards. I'd be happy to talk more about it. So the Action Switchboard, which is in pre-beta phase right now, so please take everything that you see on here with a little bit grain of salt, it's not completely done yet, is a really hopefully useful tool that I will talk about in a little bit, but first want to talk about an action that is not on the Action Switchboard, but would be a good example of something that could be organized using such a tool. So I'm going to talk about Shell Fail, which was this sort of Twitter phenomenon that happened in the summer of 2012. What happened was Greenpeace came to the Yes Men with a problem. They wanted to highlight Shell's Arctic drilling program, but had received injunctions against doing any sort of their usual shenanigans that involve getting media attention onto a problem. So they came to the Yes Men and the Yes Lab to try to come up with a creative solution to that. We came up with Shell Fail. We staged this sort of schmancy, fake, exclusive party at the Seattle Space Needle, which is where the oil rigs that Shell would be using to go exploratory drilling in the Arctic were being launched from. We pretended to be Shell. We staged this huge party to help send them off and launch the marketing campaign. And we invited a guy named Logan, that's him up there, who has some Occupy and Twitter cred, to come and play the role of a mole in this fake send-off, in this fake party. And in his role, he took a video of what happened, the sort of disaster that happened at this party. And I'll go ahead and show this. So just a setup. These are all activists who volunteered to be a part of it. They're not actually Shell executives. audio?
I'll take a look.
Let's try.
Okay, so put your glass right over here, Ian, and we'll fill you up. Here we go. Josh, yeah. It's not coming out. That's just Stover. Let me keep her. Where are you going? Hey, come on. Turn it off. I can't turn it off. Turn it off.
So it goes on and on. So sort of capitalizing on this shareability and this way of that the internet has of loving Schadenfreude and loving to see fancy people get spilled on. We put it on Twitter as if it was real, this was a real party, because people believed Logan and because people believed these other news sources that we got in on the joke who launched it. They started sharing and sharing and sharing. So here's some more examples of people that were in on the joke that were sharing it. It ended up going up to the top of Reddit. People were reporting on it as if it was real. And then it was revealed as fake, which, as with all of these examples of yes men activism and identity correction, it's always intended to eventually be revealed. And what this ended up doing is it pushed people towards this page. Here, let's see if I can find it. This page that we had set up to look like the Shell page. And this was launching the ad campaign that we were making fun of. So we set up a meme creator and asked people to submit their own designs, which then kept self-perpetuating, and after the course of about 2 months, sort of came back up again as real. So basically, the people thought it was people actually trolling Shell. People thought it was real, and so submitted a whole bunch of things. And it got people talking about the fact that Shell was exploratory drilling in the Arctic, which otherwise they might not have been talking about since Shell was doing it very, very quietly, and it had successfully put injunctions on every major environmental advocacy group in the country. So this is an example of a creative solution to a problem that came about by just literally talking to people that we knew and mobilizing a bunch of people who cared and were into the joke. So that's an example of something that can be done on the Action Switchboard. Here's an example of something that is actually in process right now. This is called the Save Canada. This is an example of a project that wasn't our idea. A lot of these projects aren't our own ideas. It's people coming to us with ideas in need of advice, in need of skills. And this is a group of Canadians who were really dismayed to hear about this new pipeline that was being built from the tar sands in Alberta all across Canada to the Atlantic Ocean. And I'll play a little bit of this really quick to see.
TransCanada is planning another pipeline, this time to send tar sands crud to the east coast. And they are employing a new tactic to silence opposition. Instead of holding a town hall which would allow citizens to see how many others are concerned, they have a trade show format where an army of TransCanada reps can limit questions and conversations to a one-on-one level. The result? Folks don't get to see how widespread the opposition is in their own community. So when TransCanada came to our town to promote their pipeline, we made handouts and outfits nearly identical to TransCanada's own, but branded instead as Save Canada. We hit the floor to work at their event, and it really worked. Attendees had a choice. They could ask their questions to the uneasy-looking people in navy shirts, but instead they chose to share their concerns with us, the helpful, happy people in navy shirts.
Instead of listening to TransCanada's scripted spin, everyone was talking about the risks.
Connections were made, people were empowered, and a town once paralyzed by the unstomachable obstacle of a heavily backed tar sands catastrophe
had now blossomed into a powerful and mobilized community. Now it's spreading. Concerned citizens from all over are joining Save Canada.
You too are invited to join us.
So that's an example of a project that is now currently on the action switchboard and is ongoing. So I guess I'll end there, and hopefully more questions will come up about the functionality of the action switchboard in the discussion afterwards.
Okay, now we're moving on to Adrian Cote. To join us, Adrian is an artist and educator whose work enables dialogue, authorship, and civic engagement. She consults numerous organizations and teaches her own digital storytelling workshop. Internationally, recent and ongoing projects include working with the curatorial departments of the Queen's Museum and the Brooklyn Museum, as well as working as a cultural organizer with Sandy's Storyline. Adrian holds an MA in Arts Politics from the Art and Public Policy Department at NYU. So take it away.
Hi everybody, how are you doing? So I have my bio, but that gives you a little bit of a sense. I kind of work between a lot of different spheres at the intersection of art and social change, so art and social justice. I come from, sometimes I'm alternately called a curator, an editor, activist, an artist, photographer, editor, the list kind of goes on and on. And so one of the things I'm curious about is today, how do some of you define yourselves? Who in this room considers themselves an activist? Okay, and who in this room considers themselves an artist in any regard? Okay, so there's a lot of overlap. And then who else, who would be more a technologist or an engineer? Okay, advocate? Interesting, okay. So obviously all these words have really different resonances for people. So let's see, I'm gonna start out by giving a little bit of my personal narrative. This is who I am. I really have been focusing throughout my career on
This is why I bought the batteries.
Can you guys hear me?
I think that works better.
Oh, you're on. Maybe I just needed to hold it closer. Okay, so one of the things I've been really excited about in my career is looking at how art and social justice intersect. Is that the fact that we're at a point now where obviously we have an oversaturation of media. There's a lot of complaint and confusion, and talk about this sense of confusion around options and information, and how to navigate that, how to curate that, how to simplify that, how to create a message, how to build coalitions, how to utilize those tools. So that's one of the things I've been investigating. I started in my career, to give a little bit of a personal narrative, with a project with the International Museum of Women, looking at how young women in their 20s and 30s were affecting social change in their communities, locally and internationally. This project was pre-most social media, but did combine a lot of the kind of tactics that people are employing today. It was available in 4 languages, as you can see here by the entry points. And then you could kind of enter according to whatever kind of content or issues you wanted to navigate. There was take actions, ways to join the conversation, look at stories, choose themes, statistics. Then there were films that were involved that were connected to other stories and issues, and then you could look at kind of some of the statistics that were offered that related to whatever issue was brought up by the story, the contributor. So this project had, a series of partner organizations, from really small regional organizations in the US and internationally to much larger organizations such as Amnesty. And then these various action campaigns and series of international events. And we also employed some of these other things, such as like, we had celebrity participants, we had panel discussions, we had hundreds of events that were everything from a roundtable discussion to a major panel with specialist advocates, activists, artists, representatives from these various NGOs. So this was a really good primer for me to kind of look at participation, how to build online communities, and then also kind of how that online communities can translate to taking action in your neighborhood, country, region, and then in this online sphere. From there, I moved to working with an organization that focused on multimedia journalism and social documentary storytelling, specifically with the community of photographers that were based in the Bay Area, or multimedia journalists based in the Bay Area and affiliated with UC Berkeley Journalism School. So there I started to kind of look at more specifically utilizing one of my passions, which is photography, to kind of really look at the history of social documentary photography, its transition into multimedia and now transmedia, and then kind of what works there, how to tell a compelling narrative, how to create a striking image or story or film. And so that was, again, another place where I started to really further investigate and really drill down into looking at visual literacy and media literacy, focusing on photography and multimedia. So, some of us have seen striking images like this. I think this is something along these lines, I think, is more some of what we imagine in terms of witnessing or exposing. The history of social documentary photography has a lot of this kind of imagery, and this straddles into the fine art kind of realm. But this is one method of presentation. He then this is Chris Jordan's work. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. He then kind of takes it into this other area where he has done these incredible large pieces that take you in. If we were out looking at the website, this could literally zoom in on the fact that this is 426,000, the number of cell phones retired in the US every day. And I think this is 2004, so obviously it would be much higher now, and you can tell by the cell phones that this is a dated image. And then, of course, these films were photographers and filmmakers and distributors come together, such as Edward Brzezinski's Manufactured Landscape and his newest one, Watermark. You're probably familiar with some of these images as well. And then I also worked during this time with photographers like Ed Cashy, who's doing a current project in Nicaragua, looking at sugarcane workers who are dying and becoming ill at really alarming rates with chronic kidney disease. So from there, I started to develop my own. I was also hired at the time to work and photograph internationally. I had extra time on the side, so I figured that I would start offering workshops in conjunction with local organizations, some of which I know from the Imagining Ourselves project, to offer visual and media literacy photographic storytelling projects. So I've now taught all over the world and of course locally, which I really love. This was one of the first workshops I taught internationally, which was with a program that brings together the refugee community in Cairo, with a great contemporary art space there called, I just forgot what it's called, Townhouse Center for the Arts. And so, these kind of programs, of course, can be really problematic as there's the concept of helicoptering in, coming from a place of privilege, coming into another community, and pretending to in some way be a savior or offer something. I think in these cases, having an awareness of that and also concurrently co-teaching, co-facilitating, offering something that I knew would be continued, it really mitigated some of those issues, but of course they're still there. These are some of the exhibitions that resulted from some of these workshops. One at a juvenile detention center in Cairo. This is a workshop that I taught, and some programming that I've done around kind of future visioning, which I think is really hard, and I don't think we have to do as much anymore around climate, but I think it is something that is another way to look at how can we tell this story, how can we involve more people. So in this project, I was asking mostly youth in school systems around New York, like, this is your neighborhood, what are the assets, what are the things you love, what are the things you want to change, how can you draw, create, imagine other versions of this. So these are some of the images that came out of that, one of those workshops. Then, pivoting somewhat, I also work in the curatorial realms. I have an immense love for the Queens Museum of Art, which is one of the few, if only, museums that hires a full-time community organizer. It's actually the Queens Museum now, it's not the Queens Museum of Art. But I worked there on a project with the artist Tanya Bruguera, who Becca also spoke at one of the events at the ATO. The concept is how can art be used as a tool or device? So, this was this exhibit. It was really thought of as a lab to investigate how is art being utilized? What are some examples of a project that goes beyond representation? So a lot of the still photography that you might have seen is really about, bringing awareness, educating, shocking, encouraging emotional resonance, all of these other things, which are entirely valid. This project is really looking at and what's like a physical, tangible outcome as well that's come from, 5 minutes. So I'm going to skip by this example and then talk about Sandy Storyline. So Sandy Storyline is a project that I'm working on right now. It was started by Marco Primo and Rachel Falcone and a whole slew of other people involved with Occupy Sandy. And it started immediately after the storm. People were on the ground responding. Both of the founders of Sandy Storyline had a background in photography, journalism, activism, social media. And so while they were doing the on-the-ground work, they also started collecting stories and providing a place for people to be able to share the emotional stories and very real impact that they were feeling at the moment. So I was going to play this clip, but I instead will encourage you to go to the website and listen to it, just to be sure that there's enough time, which is sad. So Sandy Storyline is a project that can be considered a transmedia project. In fact, it won the Tribeca inaugural Transmedia Award. And transmedia is a term that kind of, was that talked about this morning? I missed the first panel. No. Okay. I wasn't sure if you brought it up, right?
I mentioned something else in yours, I think.
Yeah, so it's a term that I think will be thrown away eventually, but it's a term that kind of means multi-platform storytelling. So, across multiple devices. And I think one thing that's really important about it too is that there's multiple voices, multiple points of entry, and multiple perspectives. So I think that that's one of the really exciting opportunities that that's open to us right now in terms of this kind of media and these kind of storytelling projects. So with Sandy Storyline, we partnered with the MIT Center for Civic Media immediately so that people who were impacted could send in text messages with SMS using Vojo to text in their stories, a photograph or a short text or whatever else. And then people, of course, can also submit via the website. They can call and like leave a story as well. And then we have a range of other programming and ways that we kind of do work with on-the-ground allies, organizers, community members, community leaders, as well as an online community to help kind of build this archive, this community, and this opportunity that is in many ways a platform. Like we're all moving toward platforms both on land and online. And this is another example of that can be redeployed. So here, I wanted to show you the back end of what Vojo looks like. I have a slide that shows like a bunch of different open source free tools such as this that you can use, but this is a really great one. So I mean, this is what it looks like when someone sends in just a short text message and an image. Here are some of the ones that we received. So Sandy Storyline not only uses participatory media and storytelling, but also works with professional journalists. So that first story that I was going to play is you know, was recorded by someone who has studied audio editing and audio engineering and storytelling. So it's this really nice mix that, like, for me, working as an educator, teaching media and visual literacy workshops with Sandy Storyline, and someone with experience in journalism, in photography, and in participatory and alternate and multiple perspectival methods of storytelling, this is really nice that it kind of brings all of those things together in a very democratic way. So they hosted, I wasn't there at this time, but a bunch of media roundtables, you know, going through, this is kind of for the people who are working more in terms of like media makers, but you know, looking at what is powerful about storytelling. These are some of the educational programs that Sandy Storyline has taught and initiated, which I'm working with, which is so fun. And I'll just go through these slides really quickly. And then these are some of the physical exhibits and other ways in which people can kind of enter a physical space, add their story, interact with the films, with the audio stories, with the photographs. I have this slide of resources, and I also have a bunch of things in terms of visual presentation, mapping, content curation, remixing, and creating and sharing stories that were, some of this is totally ripped from the Center for Civic Media. I would love to share that with any of you guys who email me, or point you in the direction to some of these. There's so many organizations that I work with that I think are incredible. One, in terms of today, I feel like I must say thanks to a lot of people who have informed some of my thinking. Lena Srivastava is an amazing woman who's a strategist in trans media activism. I definitely recommend you look at her work. She also offers approach, a little bit of kind of like design methodology. Fred Richen is more in terms of imaging, but visual citizenship, which I think is a really important thing that relates to all the things we're talking about here. And then some of these other people that I talked with or helped kind of inform my review today, but I won't go into in detail. So I can say more, and I have a lot of other ideas. One other quick thing is that I've worked with this organization called Learn, Do, Share, and they have a bunch of books that talk about methodology in terms of collaboration, prototyping, future studies and design, transmedia. They have a conference that they come up, and one of the things that they have that happens here, and I don't think that woman is here from the organization, but you can get up and say for 60 seconds, like, I'm working on this campaign, I have XY assets, skills, know-how, but I don't know how to do this other thing. This is what I want to partner with, this is what I'm excited about, this is what I'm passionate about. And you have 60 seconds, and anyone can do that. Anyone can also be on a panel or whatever else if you submit. But I just want to say this is an opportunity that's coming up, just like the one that oh, sorry. And I have to stop now, so thank you.